children, it's Grandma Carla with Chapter 2 of Freddy Goes to Florida. Now, all this time, Charles had not said anything to his wife and her 8 sisters about what the birds had told him, and he had not invited them to the meeting. "She always disapproves of everything I do," he grumbled, "and her sisters always agree with her. It would be a much better meeting if she doesn't come. I can tell her about it afterwards." His wife's name was Henrietta, and she was a very busy hen, for she had 10 little chickens to take care of, and so she was sometimes rather cross to Charles, who never did much work and used to get in her way a good deal. That night, when Charles started out, she called him back and asked him where he was going. "I have to attend a business meeting," he said importantly. "I'm expected to make a speech." Much good your speech will do anybody," said Henrietta, but she was busy putting the chickens to bed, and Charles slipped out before she had time to say any more. The meeting was a great success. Nearly all of the animals on the farm came, and the cow barn was crowded to the doors. Charles spoke long and eloquently and drew glowing pictures of what their life would be like in a southern land, lolling under the orange trees and telling stories and cracking jokes all day long. The pigs, who had come in a body and sat in the front row, applauded heartily, and the cows mooed, and the ducks quacked, and the dogs barked, and even the mice, who sat in a row on one of the rafters, squeaked excitedly. "Now, my friends," said Charles, when he had told them all he had learned from the birds, "I have placed before you these facts. It remains for us to act upon them. I, for one, intend to follow the example of the birds and go south for the winter. It is true that it is easier for birds than it is for us. The birds can fly across rivers that we shall have to swim or wade, and across mountains that we shall have to climb. I do not conceal from you that it may be a very hard journey, but it is my experience that nothing that is worth getting is easy to get. However, I shall be glad to hear what anyone else may have to say, and I accordingly throw the meeting open to discussion." And amid prolonged cheers, he hopped down from the seat of the old buggy from which he had addressed the meeting. And here is the meeting. It says the meeting was a great success. And there's the picture of them all gathered in the cow barn listening to Charles speak. Then, for quite a while, the animals were much excited and talked at once. All of them hated the thought of the long, cold winter, and when somebody, I think it was Freddy, the smallest and the cleverest of the pigs, shouted, "Why don't we start tonight?" they all gave 3 cheers and started toward the door. But just then, Jack, the larger of the 2 dogs, a wise old Scotch collie, got up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "you have all heard what my friend the rooster has said, and I think we all agree with him that it would be fine if we could all go south this winter." "Yes, yes," cried all the animals together. "But there's one thing that I think we have forgotten. I am not a fine speaker like Charles, but I just want to say that we must not forget our duty. We cannot all leave Mr. Bean, for he could not get along without us." Here, Charles interrupted excitedly. "Mr. Bean," he shouted. "What do we care for Mr. Bean? What has he ever done for us? He can sleep warm these winter nights. He can have feathered beds and stoves. But we don't have such things. We don't matter. Why doesn't he warm our houses for us? Why?" "Yes, yes, Charles," said Jock quietly, "but listen to me a minute. Mr. Bean feeds us and gives us a place to live and looks after us when we are sick. We can't just desert him, can we?" "Well, perhaps you're right," said Charles unwillingly. "Of course I am," said Jock, and he went on to say that while those of them whom Mr. Bean did not need during the winter could go south if they wanted to, he thought the others should stay. "I can't go," he said, "and one of the horses should stay to take Mr. Bean into town when he wants to go. And one of the cows and some of the hens ought to stay too, so that he will have eggs and milk. That is all I have to say." And he bowed and he sat down. A long discussion followed, but as all the animals wanted to go, none of them except Jock would admit that they were needed on the farm. They talked louder and louder and grew more and more angry at each other, and it seemed likely that the meeting would break up in disorder when there was a loud, ear-piercing meow, and Jinx the cat bounded through the doorway. In the silence that followed, all of the mice upon the rafter gave a horrified squeak, and then they rose as one mouse and tiptoed softly into a convenient hole. "Hello, folks," said Jinx breezily. "What's all the row? I could hear you all the way down by the mill pond where I was hunting frogs. Better make less noise, or you'll have old Bean out here with his shotgun. What's the matter, anyway?" "Fine," he said when they had all told him. "Fine, that's a great idea, Charlie, old boy. Didn't think you had it in you. But see here, no use quarreling about who's to go and who's not. Draw lots, that's the way to do it. Now, you say only one cow can go? Well, here's 3 of them, Mrs. Wiggins and Mrs. Wurzburger and Mrs. Wogus. Here, Jock, you take 3 straws in your mouth, 1 long one and 2 short. Now, let 'em draw, and the one that gets the long straw goes." Jock got the straws, and the cows drew. Mrs. Wiggins won. "All fair and above board, you see," said Jinx. "Now horses next. Step up, please. It's getting late." As soon as the cat had taken charge of things, the meeting became more orderly, and the arrangements for the departure of all those whom Mr. Bean would not need during the winter was quickly made. Then, when everything was decided, Charles got up again to make another speech. There wasn't really anything left for him to say, but he was fond of making speeches, and he spoke so beautifully that everyone liked to hear him, although when they got home they could never ever remember anything he said. "Now, my friends," he began, "before we break up this distinguished meeting, I should like to give you one thought to take home with you in your hearts, something to carry away with you as a memento of the kindness and good fellowship that we have enjoyed together tonight. As I look about me this evening upon all of these bright, eager young faces gathered together here under one roof, it is borne in upon me," but what it was that was borne in upon him, they never knew. For at that moment, at that very point, he stopped suddenly and climbed hastily down from the buggy seat. His wife, Henrietta, had come into the door. She marched straight down toward him between the rows of silent animals and caught him by the wing. "Bright, eager young faces, is it?" she exclaimed angrily. "I'll give you a bright, eager young face," and she boxed his right ear with her claw. "I'll give you something to carry home with you," and she boxed the other ear. I never heard such nonsense. Charles hunched his head down between his shoulders. "But, my dear," he protested. "Don't you my dear me," she said. "You come along home, where you belong. Staying out all night like this, reveling and carousing with a lot of silly pigs and cows that don't know any better. The very idea." And she pushed him unceremoniously toward the door. But before they reached it, another figure appeared, a short, bearded man in a long white nightshirt and carpet slippers. Mr. Bean had been awakened by the noise, and he had come out to see what was the matter. He had a lantern in one hand and a carriage whip in the other, and on his head was the white cotton nightcap with his red tassel. "You animals go to bed," he said gruffly, and then he turned around and stumped back to the house. In 30 seconds, all of the animals had gone, and the cow barn was empty, except for Mrs. Wiggins and Mrs. Wurzburger and Mrs. Wogus, who lived there. That's the end of Chapter 2 of Freddy Goes to Florida. This is Grandma Carla, and I love you.